Welcome into Texans Today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, and coming up on today's show, got a fully loaded one for you. Should the Texans trade for defensive tackle Derrick Brown? We'll get into that at the top of today's episode. Then the Texans, they're making some more moves. I'll let you know what they recently did, the recent roster transactions that they had, and DeMeco interview takeaways. He talked at the NFL owners meeting. I'll tell you what I found interesting and what DeMeco had to say about this Texans team moving forward. Before we get into today's show, though, I just want to thank everybody who's already hit that sub button this month, making it one of the most historic months in channel history. But I want your help one more time. Need 75 more subscribers to hit a channel record here on Texans Today. I want to break it. I need your help. Can we get 75 more subscribers and we'll have the most subs gained in a month in channel history? Help me break this record. I know we can do it. Texans fans, I believe in you. If you haven't already, go down and hit that sub button for daily Texans videos. Should the Texans trade for Derrick Brown? I'm going to break it down here on today's video. The 33rd team suggested the Texans trade for the Panthers defensive tackle, and I really got to thinking about it, and I don't hate the idea of them at least kicking the bucket if the Panthers are willing to trade away one of their young defensive stars like they did in Brian Burns earlier this offseason. He's on the last year of his rookie deal. They picked up the fifth-year option. Former first-round pick, top 10 pick by the Panthers, and he's still only he's going to turn 26 years old at the start of the season. The past 4 years for Derrick Brown, this past year was his absolute best. 103 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 2 sacks on the year this past season. A really, really big guy in the interior of the defense. He's not going to get a lot of sacks, a lot of pressures, but he is able to eat up blocks and really control the run game in the middle of that defense. Over the past 3 seasons, okay numbers, 67 tackles, 41, 34, and then 1, 3, and 2 sacks. But Derrick Brown has got steadily better every single year, and that's why this is the trade idea that I would suggest if the Texans were going to try and trade for Derrick Brown. Now, they didn't put a trade necessarily in the article, so I went ahead and made one. It's Texans get Derrick Brown, Panthers get a 2024 6th-round pick, and a 2025 conditional 5th-round pick, or Xavien Hutchinson and John Mechie. One of these two. So you get a 6th-round pick and then either a 5th-round conditional pick, and that's basically going to be on how much playing time or if he re-signs with the Texans because he is on the last year of his deal. Or instead of that, you can either get Xavien Hutchinson or John Mechie because I do think the Texans are going to add another wide receiver in this year's draft. So I don't know where that puts these two guys. Whichever one you think less of, I'm not going to say think less of, whichever one you're more willing to give up, I would add in this trade or a 5th-round pick in 2025. But what say you? What do you think of my trade idea? Would you do this trade? Give me a yes, give me a no in the comment section. This is going to be the pinned comment on today's video. So if you hit with the YouTube ad break, it's all good. Go down to the pinned comment and answer today's question. Now, here's some reasons why a trade for Brown makes sense for the Texans and why it might be possible. Panthers, they already traded Brian Burns to not pay him this offseason for really not a lot considering what he was going for just a couple seasons prior. It was rumored that they turned down multiple first-round picks for Brian Burns, and now they traded him for a 2nd-round pick and a 5th-round pick. Doesn't seem like they got a big return on investment there, and it seemed like they didn't want to pay Brian Burns, who was their best edge rusher on the team by far. Now, do they feel the same way about Derrick Brown? They did pick up his 5th-year option, but are they willing to let him go? If so, I would say it's a big win for the Texans because they still have a need at nose tackle for me. They did sign Foley Fatukasi to a 1-year, $5 million deal earlier in the offseason, but he's a little bit on the older side. It's also a 1-year deal, so maybe they're looking for a more permanent option to put at the nose tackle position there for this Texans defense. Derrick Brown, he could be the answer. And the Texans, they're already taking flyers on young guys who were picked in the top 10 picks who didn't pan out. They already got Jeff Okudah. They already got C.J. Henderson at cornerback. DeMeco Ryans truly believes in his coaching staff. So if he really does believe in his cornerback coach, in his safeties coach, in his defensive tackles coach, he could take another flyer on a guy like Derrick Brown, who maybe has panned out a little bit better than these two other guys, but still hasn't lived up to that top 10 pick pedigree that he was selected at for the Carolina Panthers. Now, coming up, some more Texans news and rumors to get into, a couple signings, and then breaking down what DeMeco had to say at the NFL owners meeting. But I wouldn't be able to do today's show if it wasn't for our amazing sponsor, and that is Game Time. Go check him out. Last second tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Where are my baseball fans at? Where you at? The season is set to get underway, and if you're trying to catch a game, the easiest way to score last second tickets is with our sponsor, Game Time. You can get great deals on last second tickets and even see your seat view before you buy the tickets. All-in prices show you what you pay without hidden fees or expenses, and Game Time has zone deals. You pick the section, Game Time picks the seats for an average savings of, wait for it, 18% on your tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CHATSPORTS for $20 off. That's CHATSPORTS. The promo code is CHATSPORTS. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Now, some Texans news to get into. This happened yesterday. Neville Hewitt re-signed by the team. The special teams linebacker was really good for the Texans this past year in special teams. Was, I believe, in around 83, 84% of snaps for the team. But the Texans re-signed him, add him to a very thin linebacker depth chart, Neville Hewitt. And they also made another move, this time clearing up a little space. They restructured Shaq Mason's contract, saving around $6.4 million against the cap. So that could really help out the Texans in looking for maybe another free agent option before the 2024 NFL draft. And these were the names that just came to mind. I was going to say Jadeveon Clowney before he was signed by the Carolina Panthers, who we talked about earlier in today's show. But here's some of the top guys I think the Texans could sign with that money if they're looking to sign another big free agent. Justin Simmons is still out there at safety. Same with Julian Blackmon, former Indianapolis Colt. Connor Williams, the offensive lineman, is available, formerly of the Miami Dolphins. Tyler Boyd, the former Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver, is still available. Calais Campbell, defensive lineman for the Atlanta Falcons last season, is available. And Xavien Howard at cornerback, even though they signed two guys. So I think the dream is dead of bringing X back to Houston. He's another guy that I would consider looking at if you're trying to add another high-profile guy in free agency. But what say you? Give me a name. Name a free agent you want the Texans to sign before the 2024 NFL draft, even though I don't think they're going to sign another guy before the draft. I think the Texans, and I think some of these free agents that are still available, are going to say, hey, I'm going to go through the draft. I'm going to wait and see who the teams pick, and whatever areas of need they still need, I'm going to go and gravitate towards that team. So whoever the Texans don't get in the 2024 NFL draft, I think you'll see them trying to supplement that with a couple of the free agents that are still available, and those guys might wait until after the draft. But let me know a name that you want the Texans to still sign. Up next, breaking down what DeMeco Ryans had to say during the NFL owners meetings this past week. I'm going to tell you what I found most interesting that he had to say this past week. First off, Texans love the depth in the draft. He talked about how there's a sweet spot that him and the organization, him and the front office really thinks they found on their draft board for this year's draft. He said, round 2 through round 5, there's a lot of guys that we could get. So that makes me think, could DeMeco try to even trade back more? Will the Texans pick at 42, or will they continue to kind of move back and stockpile picks in the middle of this draft? DeMeco seems confident with the Texans draft board, and the Texans are really confident that there's a lot of depth in this draft. So we'll see what the Texans do on draft day. He did mention the cornerback position and the moves of bringing in guys like Jeff Okudah, guys like C.J. Henderson. He said he likes those young guys who are unproven. He said they're pretty good corners. They're sticky. They have some good tape out there on them already. But he says maybe in the better situation, maybe with me in the right coaching staff, we can get the most out of these guys. DeMeco really leaning on his coaching staff, really leaning and really taking bets on himself and his coaching staff on bringing some of these young, unimproven guys like a Jeff Okudah, like a C.J. Henderson in. Let's see if it pays off. I did have a viewer that messaged me on Twitter, and actually, let me actually look it up because I want to give him some credit because he, Chris Unger, he actually is the one that brought up to me that the linebacker coach was there whenever Jeff Okudah was there at Ohio State, and the safety coach was there at Florida when Henderson was there at Florida. So some ties to those guys who were there whenever they were playing in college. Maybe that plays somewhat of a factor into that decision. Thanks for sending me that DM and love the conversation back and forth. If you want to hit me up, go do it at Jeremy Chuggs. Next up, the next thing that DeMeco said that about this offseason was he's talking about the defensive line and the fact that he loved getting guys that are versatile along the defensive line. Mainly talking about Denico Autry, guys like Mario Edwards, maybe even Danielle Hunter, because he's an outside guy. He can maybe sometimes line up at the 3, even though most of the time you're going to line him up on the outside. But he was talking about how he wanted to transform this defensive line and have guys who can play in multiple different spots, multiple different positions, that the Texans can show a ton of different looks next season. It makes me think maybe DeMeco Ryans is trying to ramp up this defense a little bit, bring a couple new schemes, bring a couple new things to the table this coming season that he couldn't do last year with the defensive line, trying to find a new type of guy to add to that defensive line. I think it might pay off. I really like the addition of Denico Autry, and obviously I think Danielle Hunter was a slam dunk signing by the Houston Texans this past offseason. He also talked about a couple of guys that were on the team last year, Dell and Tytus Howard. He said their recovery is going swimmingly. Both guys should be good to go during OTAs in the preseason, even though I don't know how much work both those guys will get during the preseason because they're both solidified starters going into next year. They don't really have to fight for a roster spot or really fight for their spot going into next season, especially coming off injury. I think they'll ease their way into it, but DeMeco said both those guys should be good to go for next season, and he showed some love to our favorite guy, our QB1, our Capitan C.J. Stroud. Yeah, he said there should be a big leap for C.J. Stroud going into year 2, which is music to all Texans fans' ears. That's what we all want to hear. We all want to hear good things about C.J. Stroud, of course, the way he showed out in the Pro Bowl game, the way he's talked about how he's approaching this offseason. Everybody's going to be looking at CJ7 going into next year. He was kind of like started off not slow, but started off not a lot of hype around C.J. Stroud going into last season. By the end, he was one of the most hyped up guys in the NFL. So that's only going to grow in year 2. I'm really excited to see C.J. Stroud and what he brings to the table this season. And if you're with me, go down and spam CJ7 if you're pumped to see our guy C.J. Stroud next season. And this will also let me know who are the real ones. Who are the people that made it to the end of today's video. So if you're one of those real ones and then you're so pumped to see C.J. Stroud run out of that tunnel next season, give me a C.J. Stroud. Yeah, go down and type CJ7 in the comments section. And if you haven't already, go follow me on Twitter at Jeremy Chuggs. That's where you can find me on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, giving you the latest Texans news and rumors, NFL rumors, the dankest memes on the internet. And as always, go down and hit that sub button. We're 75 away from a channel record, ladies and gentlemen. So if you haven't subbed already, what are you doing? We are the fastest growing Texans channel on YouTube, the #1 Texans channel on YouTube. So go down and hit that sub button and join the wave.